And welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this Embrace Equity panel with our incredible women of distinction who have honored us with their presence and their insight coming forward today. Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that YWCA Sudbury is located on Anishinaabeg territory and Robinson Huron Treaty territory. As an organization that supports women escaping violence, we must acknowledge the direct connection that land-based violence has on women. We must also acknowledge that the theft and dispossession of Indigenous land is inseparable from the continued violence against Indigenous women and Two-Spirit folks, and in turn, inseparable from the work that we are doing today. We also seek to recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples, the contributions that they make in shaping and strengthening this community and other communities as well. As settlers, this recognition of ongoing settler colonialism must go beyond spoken words to make real our collective commitment to the Truth and Reconciliation 94 calls to action in our communities, and in particular to bring justice for murdered and missing Indigenous and Two-Spirit people, women and girls across what is known to us as Canada. All right, a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. We are recording this session. It will be afterwards put up on the YWCA Sudbury website, so you can watch it after. And you'll notice that you are currently muted. If we could just remain that way, we've got a big topic ahead of us. Equity is huge, and we want to get as much time with our women of distinction as possible. So again, welcome everyone to our Embrace Equity virtual panel discussion. We often see the words equity and equality used interchangeably, but there's a real and impactful difference between them. This International Women's Day, we're calling for folks to highlight the importance of understanding, acknowledging, and valuing this difference to embrace equity. So a quick refresher on the definitions. Equality means each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. However, equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances. So we need to allocate the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. At a quick glance, equality looks like the standard of fairness, but it can actually be exclusionary rather than inclusive. It assumes that everyone is the same and that everyone starts out in the same place. But we all know that's not true. We're all unique and different and on our own paths. And equity aims to give everyone what they need to be equally successful. As we chat with this panel of incredible women, please keep in mind and consider how equal opportunities are no longer enough. I'm really pleased and really honored to have this opportunity to introduce our panel. So we have joining us today, we have Adebola, who is the founder of Afro Women and Youth Foundation. And she founded this foundation, this nonprofit, in response to some racial experiences she saw in her life and her communities, so that she can empower and mentor Black women through collaborative programs. She also supports families and her community through her work with the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare and Women and Gender Equality's Sharing Pandemic Experiences project. We also on this panel have Kyelle Byne, and Kyelle is passionate about advocating for 2S LGBTQ+ people and has been a trailblazer not only as a board member for Fierté Théâtre Sudbury Pride, but also in her work at Science North, where she's a grants manager and a driving force for the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Committee. Her efforts have earned her recognition as a Taking It Global Rising Youth alumni, and she was selected from a large pool of candidates for a New Leaders Fellowship to the Association of Science and Technology Centers. Jackie, also joining us today, is has 30 years plus in the education field, Through this time, she's sharpened her listening skills, built connections, and gathered knowledge of the community resources. And she puts all of that information, all of that knowledge that she's gathered to full use every time she's in a position to mentor or help support an individual or youth in need. She has since retired, but her commitment to her community has led her to take on a leadership role with the Sudbury District Restorative Justice. And she also sits on the boards of NISA, Northern Initiative for Social Action, and the Sudbury Area Victim Services, along with the Northern Youth Services. And last but not least, we have Kyelle, who immigrated to Sudbury in a challenging time in the middle of the pandemic, and where others may have been daunted, her entrepreneurial spirit saw opportunities as she began Kyelle's Everclean, the only Black-owned cleaning service in the area of Sudbury, International Obioma, and Kyelle Cooks, in order to help her peers in need. She finds time to run these operations while still completing her studies, volunteering, and raising her children as a single mother. Thank you again so much for joining us. It is an absolute pleasure. Yeah. I'm going to kick off this panel with a question to kind of everybody, just so that we can kind of get a bit more of a feel for who you are, what you do, what your passions are. So could you tell us, the question is, could you tell us a little bit more about how you foster equity in the work that you do, or what this year's International Women's Day theme, Embrace Equity, means to you? Let's kick it off. I see Kyelle, you are first in my queue if you want to start us off.
Absolutely, happy to do so, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me today. I think you stated it very, very well when in your definition of equity earlier, that the notion of embracing equity is that it's not enough to just create equal opportunities anymore. We need to take additional effort and really carefully consider the barriers, whether they're real barriers or even just perceived barriers that face our communities, and take very conscious and intentional action to reach out to people and bring them into these opportunities that we are creating. So more than just saying there's an opportunity available, but creating space to invite people into it. And so in my work with Fierté Sudbury Pride, I foster equity mostly through funding, by working with community leaders and with businesses to secure funds so that we have the ability to create projects and launch these initiatives where we're able to meet people where they are at, to make our city more equitable. And then in my work at Science North through our EDIA committee, similarly providing guidance on how our staff and our hiring processes, the programs that we do for our visitors, the outreach that we do across Northern Ontario, how we can be more diverse and make sure that the access that we are providing isn't just for people who can be at a science center in Sudbury. It's for people who have barriers to accessing that experience. And so we can go to them and provide them with learning and education.
That's awesome work. Thank you. Thank you, Kyelle. Adebola, would you follow up?
Sure. Okay, thank you, Kyelle. I like that explanation that you guys gave about equity and also how you foster it in your workplace. Yes, so I like this definition by Susan Gardner that says equality is giving everyone a shoe and equity is giving everyone a shoe that fits. I like it because it captures what equity is, and it also helps me to think more about all the other things involved in equity. So who has the power to get the shoes, and who need the shoes, and how are we identifying the kind of shoes that is needed? It's talking about giving everyone a shoe that fits. I think a lot of times we kind of assume needs for people, for racialized individuals, but it's important to start from a place of building authentic relationships with them, identifying needs. And we cannot identify needs fully if we're not making efforts to build relationships, to make real connections. And in my work at the Afro Women and Youth Foundation, when I started 3 years ago, I started in a shelter in Toronto, and I just went to, I started speaking to people that look like me in that shelter to know how they're feeling. I wasn't living in the shelter, but I wanted to provide support to people in the shelter. And I was able to identify some of their needs. And from there, we started providing workshops. We spoke to the management of the shelter. We got a space in the shelter, and it eventually became an organization that is registered. I think that equity, embracing equity means identifying or knowing barriers faced by equity deserving individuals and making efforts to provide support in ways that are meaningful, that are strength-based, and also that are led by racialized or marginalized individuals. Also, in my work at the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare, we've been working on a project for about 3 years now, and it is learning to know, getting understanding about how COVID has impacted racialized mothers and educators across Ontario. And this will lead us into co-creating program and policy recommendations across Ontario to policymakers. Also at the Afro Women and Youth Foundation, we recently launched anti-Black racism campaign for Black History Month. And as a board member at the family, as a former board member at the Family Support Institute of Ontario, I was part of the people who helped to put together an anti-Black racism work plan for Family Support Institute of Ontario, and also at Seneca College. In my work at the Afro Women and Youth Foundation, we're currently working with a team to review curriculum for the School of Early Childhood Education. So there's individual work that I do. I also do a lot with communities, with organizations. And I think that's very important because this work is not what you can do as an individual. You need people, you need system, you need structure to be able to get a lot done. So that's how I foster equity, and that's the definition that I hold on to, the description and definitions of shoes and who's wearing it, who needs it, how are we getting it, and are we actually getting the right sizes that fit people.
Absolutely. It definitely paints a picture in your mind. It's a really, really good definition. Thank you for sharing that, Adebola. Jackie, if you wouldn't mind keeping it up.
Jumping in?
Yeah.
Okay, for sure. For me, equity means making sure people receive what they need to be successful. And, it can take many different forms. Is the office culture inclusive? Are we being inclusive to, all differences? And, are all voices heard and valued? Are the office practices equitable? A girls' night out, a boys' night out. We're going to have, a couples party. Is it inclusive? Does it include everybody, regardless of gender identity, sexual orientation? Is there diverse team composition in the workplace? Are we checking our biases? And I think we have to be intentional about that, intentionally checking our biases. Are the money practices in our organizations equitable? Do we have petty cash versus credit cards? And the expectation that, people can just buy it on their credit card and then they can come and get reimbursements. That's not always manageable. When we're looking at finances. What is our board composition? Is it diverse? What are our hiring practices? Often what happens is that people hire people that look like them. So are we intentional about checking those biases? And, what is the knowledge of diversity that is actually within our organization? Are we intentional about teaching about diversity? What's the language use that is being used? So, to achieve equitable workplaces, it's a continual, intentional commitment to create and sustain equity and to build that into our policy frameworks and our daily practices. And you know what? If we get it wrong, and we will at times, we need to be open. We need to be open to the learnings and be accountable and responsible for repairing those harms when we notice that there's inequity in our workplaces. Thanks, Julie.
No, thank you, Jackie. Yeah. It's always slow change when we're changing our processes, but we got to keep at it. And for sure, absolutely. Yeah, Kyelle, would you like to chime in on this as well?
Yeah, I mean, you fantastic ladies have said it all, but I will still put a little bit into it. It's very easy to confuse equity with equality, just like Julie said in the beginning. So it's very important that people understand the difference. Equity is creating that inclusive action in the world of realistic people, while equality is the goal. Inclusion is the end result. And without equity, we cannot have equality and we cannot have inclusion. So collective activism from everyone through intentionality, because like Jackie said, we all have to be intentional about this, is what drives change. From grassroots actions to wide-scale momentum, we can all embrace equity. And we all have to be an advocate for equity. It's not just something that board of directors have to do, or a certain institution have to do, or a certain organization have to do. Each individual can be an advocate. Just by you noticing that there's something wrong in a supermarket while you're doing your grocery shopping, you can speak up for whatever you've seen that isn't working right. You can even speak up for someone else who you think must have encountered racism and decided to let it slide. You can speak up for that person. So it starts with each person. We can all do it. Equity is something nice to have. Actually, it is a must have. But the focus on gender equity needs to be part of every society's DNA. As we celebrate International Women's Day, we need to understand that women fall into different categories. There are single parents as mothers. There are mothers who do not have children and have been discriminated for that. There are women who are not married and of marriageable age and have been discriminated for that as well. And there are also women who are married and living a happy life and are still being looked down upon, like, oh, they can't enjoy certain benefits just because they have it all. So we also have to focus on the fact that we have gender issues to discuss when it comes to equity for women in all categories. So with that being said, I think we should share the passion and the excitement that comes from valuing and supporting inclusion. We should daily reflect on how we can all be part of the solution and not the problem. Thank you.
That's inspiring words, Kyelle. Thank you so much. And yeah, this is what this panel is all about, is getting together and, if not inspiring people to take action and work together, then at least start the conversation. At the very least, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, everyone. I'm gonna go around and ask some questions, and I'm gonna start off with Adebola. In your experience, in your personal experience as a Black woman, your professional experience in youth education and women's services, and your volunteer experience as the founder of Afro Women and Youth Foundation, how do you think that we can leverage mentoring and modeling to support the folks around us who are facing inequities?
I think first we have to look at the people that we have in our workplaces. So, for example, I think Jackie mentioned that people hire people who look like them. So if we're hiring people who look like us, and the people that we serve, the racialized people or equity deserving people, don't look like the people who work in our places or in our offices, then that could be a barrier. We could want to have intention to support them, but at the same time, because we don't have people who look like them, that could be a big challenge. So I would say looking into hiring policies and practices that could, need some review. Also looking into cultural awareness, how much knowledge is available for people who need the services that we're offering. Cultural awareness, which could look like, could look like different things. But in summary, it is learning to be open to knowing about other people's culture. And again, it takes me back to what I said at the beginning, that we have to be intentional about building relationships, about getting to know people. And then from cultural awareness, I would also say respecting diverse perspective and knowledge, and mentorship and modeling. Sometimes I think the big challenge that we have is lack of representation, which takes me back to hiring policies and practices, and also a lack of representation because we probably don't have enough people who look like the people who deserve the service that we're offering. That could be a major challenge. Also, I want to also say that in some cases, mentorship and modeling could also be a little different when it's health related issues, or when it's sexual identity or sexual orientation, or gender diverse people, because a lot of time in my work, what I've found is that people who look like me sometimes, who have health issues, do not necessarily want mentors who look like them. It could be for reason of stigmatization. It could be for different other reasons. So I think in terms of modeling, it still comes down to learning from the people that we're supporting, identifying their needs on an ongoing basis, knowing how they want to be supported, and then we follow their lead on how they want to be supported. It's good to have people who look like other people, have people who look like you when you're offering services, but there are some situations when people don't want people who look like them to support them, and we have to respect them. So we have to respect that. So in summary, I would say that also comes down to relationship building, needs assessment, and letting people who deserve the services that we're offering lead us on how to support them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, very, very insightful. And I mean, people know their needs best. So yeah, following their lead. Absolutely. For sure. Speaking of needs, Jackie, a lot of your work facilitates around or facilitates access to community services for those in need. You have a whole mental list happening of support systems in Sudbury, and it's incredible. Can you maybe tell us about some of the transformations that you've witnessed in folks when you've been able to help them receive opportunities and resources that meet them where they are and address their unique needs?
Certainly. So, you mentioned in the introduction that I am a retired educator. So when I was in education and working with students, frequently, there would be that need to connect to services outside of the school. And I always found it a struggle to figure out what's where, and looking for some kind of a database. And I could never find something that was really complete. And so I retire, and things end up the way they end up. And here I am as the executive director of Sudbury District Restorative Justice. So for me, changing from education to a social services field, I needed to know who's who. And so I developed a community social services database. And so I put it all on the Google Sheets platform, and it's available free to anybody. They can just go to the Sudbury District Restorative Justice website and find it there. And the idea behind it was that, what's available in our community. And then I wanted to make sure that I shared that freely so that others can self-navigate. So, and what I have found is that when someone has the tools, it's self-empowering to solve their own problem. And sometimes they need help. And how that help is given is important. And Adebola just, it mentioned about we need to learn from those who we support. I love that phrase, Adebola. It's so powerful. We need to learn from people with whom we support, so that when somebody has those tools, how the help is given is important. It must be invited. And a person who is seen, who is treated with dignity and compassion, then they can trust. And they need stigma-free, safe spaces to connect with the helpers, and not to be shuffled, from telling their story multiple times to multiple different agencies before they can get help. Because a lot of people, that exhausts them, it embarrasses them, and they stop, and they won't continue that. Self-empowerment begins when that connection is made, and then the world opens. And, to witness a client understand trauma, understand their trauma response, understand and use strategies to help them navigate their own personal trauma triggers, and then to see them grow and thrive, and believe in their own power to self-navigate and continue to heal. It's humbling to witness, and I feel very privileged, to be that witness and see their self-pride emerge. And the keys are there again. Adebola and Kyelle mentioned this: respect, and then we can relate. And when we can relate, we can reason with each other. And when we can reason, we can self-regulate and self-empower. So those are kind of my thoughts on that. And again, I find myself in a very privileged position to be able to witness self-empowerment through people accessing social services in our community. And also, I'm humbled to work alongside the many social service community supports, and to connect with them and to collaborate, so that people in need in our community can access that and thrive. So thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah, it's got to be absolutely magical to just see somebody come into their own power, I guess is another way to put it. Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of people who have self-empowered themselves, Kyelle, as a Black woman entrepreneur, you've certainly faced adversity, barriers, and maybe even injustices on your path to success. Yet you remain an overall joyful and positive person. It is amazing to just be in your presence because you're so positive. What, if you don't mind my asking, what has helped you empower yourself and overcome the challenges that you've faced as you've worked to reach your goals and to have your entrepreneurial businesses and stuff?
Yeah. So I have really worked on myself. I've done a lot of self-development. I've done a lot of personal growth, and that has really shaped my mentality towards life. I used to be a very angry person. I used to be a very fussy person, but after a while, you grow mentally, you grow emotionally, you reach that phase when you realize that all these emotions keep on damaging you. And then you have to begin to love yourself. When you love yourself, you can show that love to other people. You can love other people in return. It takes a lot of work. It takes time to be able to become who I am today, despite the fact that I still face injustices. And we cannot talk about injustices as a Black marginalized woman without talking about racism. That would be another topic for another day. Maybe next year we'll talk about that, because we can't rule that out. So I have experienced racism in all forms. I have experienced injustices in all forms, but what keeps driving me is the fact that I know where I was coming from, and I know what it took me to get here, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And I will not let anyone or any form of injustice take that away from me. So when I love myself so much, I'm able to give that love back in return. That's why when I see people act unjustly to me, I'm able to put them back on track, because I'm not going to let it slide. No, I will put them back on track, but with love. I will not treat them the way they have treated me, but I will give them the correction they need to have, but with love. So that takes a lot of self-awareness. You have to get to that point in life for you to know that you cannot repay evil with evil. And that's why that helps me to also want to empower other women. Not just other women, there are also men who work for me in my cleaning business. I have men, I have Indians, and talking about equity, I'm very diverse. I work with everyone. I'm not limiting my business to just Black people. And when I talk to them, I ask them, how would you want to work? Because it's important. They're the ones who do this work most of the time. They're the ones who use all these cleaning chemicals all the time. What's best for you? What time works for you? And most of these people are also students. So I need to be considerate of the fact that they have other things they're doing. I'm not going to impose on them. I'm not a boss. I call myself, I'm not a boss, and I don't call them my staff. I call them teammates, because we all work together as a team, and it might sound like, oh, they're just minor things, all the way from the little details like, okay, what kind of chemicals should we use? I ask them all these questions because I want to engage them. I want to make them feel included. I'm not just going to throw things at them. All the way to the kind of branded t-shirts we wear. Okay, do you guys prefer color white or do you prefer color black? And then we all share ideas and we all brainstorm together, because trust me, without them, there will not be Kyelle's Ever Clean. There will not be me. So when I'm empowering them, I'm also getting good things back in return. So we do this together, and it's teamwork. And you cannot just do this on the surface or just do it for the fun of it. You have to do it intentionally, So equity is very vast, and it cuts across. It's even in the family we live in. It's on the streets where we live in. It's in the organizations where we work. It's very, very wide. And like Jackie said earlier, there are times when we are going to get it wrong. But what is important is that when we get it wrong, let us make sure we work on it and put some corrections into it. So that keeps me going. Life is going to be rough. Equity is going to at some point not work. But when you have a positive mindset, you just have to make it work. You keep going, you keep looking for more ideas to make it better. We live in Canada that has a lot of diversity, a lot of cultures. People come from different backgrounds. And culture is very vast too, all the way from the way we talk, the way we dress, the food we eat. We have to understand that people have different perspective and different way of life. So you can't rule that out. You always have to be respectful of everyone around you. What best works for you. When you're not sure, you ask, how do I address you? What would you like to eat? And I like when we were going to have that award ceremony you had for us, Julie. Yeah, for Women of Distinction Award. I like that you asked me in the email, you're bringing your son, what does he like to eat? Does he have any dietary concern? How can we make him feel comfortable? Because, the event is for adults, and then you have a young child. I was so impressed when we got there. There were toys for him, and there were like drawing books for him. And I was like, wow, this is equity. Now I understand what equity means, because you want him to still feel comfortable, even though along the way he might get bored. You thought of him, and you put in things that could keep him busy. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I'm learning from you. I'm learning from everyone here. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I know I've taken more than 5 minutes, but I'm just so very passionate about talking about gender equity. I know that forging gender equity isn't limited to women solely, fighting the good fight. No. Allies are incredibly important for the social economic, cultural, and political advancement of women. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kyelle. Yeah, it's absolutely teamwork. I'm so happy that I could make that experience more inclusive for you and your son. We're learning from each other. Yeah, and doing it together, and yeah, being called in when we may not be taking the right steps forward, so important, and keeping a positive look on it.
Right.
Not taking it necessarily, not taking it personally, but taking it as we can move forward with this. This is the way we need to move forward.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah. So with that being said, so Kyelle, you're a young advocate for and a leader in equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility issues. What are some ways that you use to engage and motivate people that are around you and bring them along with you on this really important work?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that this is an area that I'm definitely still learning and still working and identifying challenges to how I do this as a young advocate. But one thing that I am faced with a lot that I actively choose to work on and use to my advantage is that I don't allow the things that people would perceive as a disadvantage to be a barrier to people taking me seriously. So things like my age and things like my gender. There is a lot of power in a way into coming into a room where people are ready to underestimate you and then immediately blowing their minds by the strength of your ideas and the strength of your conviction, your passion, the careful thought and eloquence that you put into things. There's a lot of power in that to sort of taking people aback for a moment, and then they have to, they're all of a sudden they are the ones who have to quickly reevaluate all of these preconceived notions they have and reassess you and then see you on an equal playing field. And there's a lot of respect that comes from that. So that's something that I try to use to my advantage, particularly regarding my age. I also use this sort of as an avenue to ask people for guidance and support. There is a lot of community leaders and colleagues that I've had who have been really incredible mentors to me. And through those mentorships conversations, I'm actually able to introduce a lot of the equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility topics that I care about. So these may not be things that are necessarily important to my mentors when we first start these conversations, but as they get to know me and as we start to work together and they help me advance in my professional career, I'm able to sort of seed a lot of these topics and have these really productive conversations where I'm able to insert these ideals into their frameworks and their professional ideology. And we have really productive conversations and are able to take action using the power and privilege that they have and the power and privilege that I have just by being able to be with them at those tables. So leveraging these mentorships that I've been able to forge. I love what you said, Kyelle, about correction, but with love, because one of the other things that I wanted to talk about is that one of the things that I'd have to do a lot of when engaging and motivating people in this work is exercise a lot of patience, because we're all at different stages in our learning about equity and diversity and inclusion. I don't think there is any one person who can say, oh, I've learned everything there is to know about equity and I do it perfectly. We're all at varying stages in this journey. And a lot of the people I work with are very early in that journey. And so having the ability to be very honest and open with them and say, hey, I'm learning about this too, and being very empathetic and forgiving of their mistakes, but in a way where you are actively correcting people with love, where you are saying you have done harm, you have made an error, you have the language that you are using or the actions that you are taking or even just the mental framework that you are operating within isn't where we want to be moving in a more equitable space, but we're moving towards something together, and let's take some time to gently correct you and take the time, because it does show a lot of caring to correct people. I think if we let people sit in their ignorance, that doesn't show a lot of love for them. That doesn't show a lot of faith in them. It doesn't, and it really doesn't progress us forward as a society. So taking time to say open and honestly, you have made a mistake, but I understand the framework that you're coming from. I forgive you. You're not a bad person. Let's move together and learn and be better and make changes together, and together create a society that does want to learn and care more about EDIA.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, incredible. And it does absolutely take a lot of work, but challenging those mindsets is what is going to be a big part of creating that change that we want to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm opening this up to all our panelists here. Each of you does incredible work to support and uplift marginalized folks. For anyone who's in our audience today and who's listening in, for anybody who's going to be listening in on the recording, what's one meaningful thing you think that they could do, or we could do together that could make our community more equitable and more inclusive? Who wants to start us off?
Well, I can. You know, you asked for one thing. I'm not going to give you one thing. I'm going to give you a whole bunch. So here they come.
Okay.
Listen to women. Listen to women.
Mm.
Support women. Hire women.
Mm.
Empower women. Women in the workplace are an asset. You know, as leaders, promote women. We think equitably. We know how to empower others. We are visionaries. We are strategic thinkers. And we belong in all places where decisions are made. We belong at the table. We belong at the table, and we belong having a voice at that table. And sometimes flipping that table. You know, having equal representation brings diversity. It brings diversity in thinking, and that results in equitable decisions. So that's my little, you know, how can we as a community be more equitable and inclusive? Absolutely. You know, listen and empower women.
Yeah.
Sorry if I got a little bit too enthusiastic there, but.
Not at all. Very strong words. Very powerful. Thank you.
Just enthusiastic enough.
Yes. Kyelle, who wants to follow up on that one?
Sorry, gals. It probably stole everybody's thunder.
Yeah, I can go. That's fine. So like I said earlier, just be the change. It starts with each and every one of us, regardless of your age, regardless of your race, regardless of your gender, regardless of your status. You're not too small. You're not too young to make an impact and to be the change. Each of us has to be the ally. Each of us has to be an advocate. We have to speak up. There are people who may not be able to speak up, but when we see those things, we have to be the voice they need to be heard. So we should not just let things slide. We should not just let things slip. When you know the right from wrong, when you see that this is wrong, and if it makes you uncomfortable in the slightest way, that means it is wrong, then talk about it, because we are all too grown to be comfortable with things that don't move us forward. So if one issue, because there's this systemic inequity, there's this systemic racism, there's this systemic injustice that we see, or that is being painted in a beautiful way, but underneath it's very ugly. So when you see it, don't embrace it. What we should embrace is equity, and let that go on and on for a long time, as much as we can do it.
Yes.
See, there's strategic thinking. There, right there is a visionary.
Yes.
I can go
Amazing.
next. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you,
absolutely.
Kyelle.
Please do.
Yeah, I would like to say that inequity issues and injustices uh, is is a lot in our world. And I would just want to encourage people listening today to take it one step at a time. You could start from the place of knowledge. There's a lot to learn. We all continue to learn, and that's how we get better at the things that we do. So there's a lot to learn about racism, classism, sexism, ableism, ageism. There's so many homophobia, religious prejudice. There's so many things to learn. But one day at a time, whatever you're able to know per time, just go from the place of knowledge. And also, after knowledge, take action. So how can you be part of the change? Speak up when you see any form of unfairness, any form of injustices, speak up, take action. And also, I would say that we shouldn't just be, we have a lot of people who use the word allyship or being an ally. And most times I think it's just performative allyship that we see around, people using it for their own gains. But is it actually like genuine? Is it real, or you're just wanting to just be like, look like you're part of the change, but not necessarily making that change? In the hiring policies or in your place of work, you have one person who looks like a racialized person, but does that person have a voice on the table? Are they part of the people making the decisions? So there are a lot of questions that we're supposed to be asking ourselves and trying to also find answers to those questions. And I think lastly, I'll just say it's okay to be uncomfortable. Equity issues, EDI, anti-racism and all of that gets a lot of people uncomfortable. And it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to have uncomfortable conversations as long as it is respectful, as long as, but we have to get it going, because if we stop having those conversations, then we're not ready for change. So yeah, knowledge, action, and keep getting uncomfortable and respecting people on that journey. If that makes sense. Thank you. Yeah.
And I'm probably just going to reiterate some of the things that have been said too. But I think first of all, I'll say allyship is a verb. It is an action. An ally is not something that you are. An ally is something that you do. And I think that is one of the most important things that people can take away. I think beyond that, it's been said a few times throughout, but listening and learning is key. And that includes like listening to members of underrepresented groups when they tell you this is a barrier to me participating in this, and then doing your own research, not necessarily putting that effort, that onus to teach you on a member of that underrepresented group. Take some time to like listen to what you've been told, go away, do your own research, do your own self-reflection too. Pause and think about the advantages that you have in your own life that might make it harder for you to see those barriers. Think to yourself, oh, well, why didn't I see that as something that would make it more difficult for someone to access this opportunity? Take some time to unpack any preconceived notions or challenges that you have that make it hard to understand these barriers. Process it, unpack it, take some time to reflect on who you are as a person, and then go back to these groups and say, okay, I have done my research. I have thought about who I am. I have thought about what notions I came into that first conversation with. I am ready to listen to you again and listen to you as these are the needs that you are expressing and these are the actions that you are saying that need to be taken. And now let's have a collaborative conversation about how we actually make those actions happen.
Lovely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm hearing a lot of both active things to do, like being courageous and speaking up and taking action, and also a lot of self-reflective and more passive things to do, like learning and taking it upon yourself to do that learning. I mean, nobody can learn for you, so right.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you all so much for sharing those insights. We are we're just closing up now, and I'm going to open up the floor real quick. We got about 5 minutes. Is there anything else that any of you would like to share or say in light of International Women's Day tomorrow?
Yes.
Yes.
But because I keep jumping in, I want to. I want to hear from the other gals first.
Yeah, sure.
I just like to say that I'm so grateful to have had a chance to join today's discussion. I'd encourage everyone to take some time tomorrow to thank the women in their lives. I know that I have a big bouquet of flowers with my mom's name on it. And as we prepare to sort of celebrate International Women's Day, I was doing some reading beforehand, and I wanted to share a quote by Jessica Stern, who's one of the leaders of Outright Action International, which really resonates with what I want to celebrate tomorrow. And so what she said is that International Women's Day is about celebrating the inclusivity of the diversity of women. And that's whether lesbian, bisexual, trans, intersex, or queer, women of color, women of diverse social and economic backgrounds, religions and families, women who have a range of physical abilities, and gender non-conforming people. When we're celebrating International Women's Day, we are celebrating all women. We are sparking conversations about how we can take action and provide more equitable supports to all women. And I encourage everyone to think about all the incredible women in their lives, and to say thank you and to ask them, how can I support you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think I'll just say that everyone who identifies as a woman tomorrow should take some time for self-care, no matter how little. I think we have a lot going on in our lives that people don't even see or can ever imagine. So take some time for self-care and also appreciate the women in your lives. No matter who they look like, it's good to appreciate them. And also I will invite everyone who is able to attend. We have an event coming up tomorrow at Greater Sudbury Public Library, 74 Mackenzie Street, and it's a day of celebration and resistance. So I mean, it comes up at 6 p.m. in the evening, and there's going to be open mic, so you can get on the mic and share your thoughts, share a poem or anything you want to say about International Women's Day. There's also going to be some gifts for women, so I'm inviting everyone to join us tomorrow at 7 p.m. at the Greater Sudbury Public Library. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'll go. I just want to say to every woman out there that you're loved, you're beautiful, and that whatever you do, put your mind into it. Don't ever sabotage yourself. Your feelings are valid, and every work you put out there is important. You're not too small to make a difference. And I'm so grateful to be on this platform today with these notable women. You all are doing great things. I look up to you all. You're so inspiring. I am so honored. I do not take this moment for granted. I really appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you, Julie, for bringing me into this. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to leapfrog off of something that Kyelle said, and I'm not going to sing. So I'm saving everybody's ears here. You can buy yourself flowers, right? Self-belief is our power, and so we should feed that. And we can write our own name in the sand, right? And write other women's names in the sand. So women need to lift each other up, right? Empowered women empower women. So the ways that we treat each other, it needs to change. You know, I would talk to youth a lot about a little math lesson. They don't want to hear me sing, but math they'll listen to. But you know, 1 + 1 = 1. That's competition, right? There's a winner and a loser. 1 + 1 = 2. And that's cooperation, right? You know, that you're cooperating. But really what we should strive for is 1 + 1 = 3. You know, where women's synergy, right? That synergy where we are more than the sum of the parts. So, you know, women's synergy, that's going to be the force. That's going to be the force that's going to change the status quo. And I am honored and humbled to be with all of you women and to learn from you. And I really look forward to the relationships that we build in the future and the great things that we can do together. Thank you, Julie, for bringing us together.
Thank you all so much. You're all such incredible and inspiring women. It's amazing to be here virtually, mind you, but like be here and be able to have this conversation with you. You bring such insight into this conversation specifically right now, but also to everything, everything that you all do. So thank you very much to each and every one of you, and also to everyone who has joined the meeting today and who will be listening later on. Thank you for taking the time and for absorbing and listening to women and starting this conversation and thinking about what steps you can take to make a better tomorrow. So we hope that you have found this discussion as meaningful as I have found it, and have an absolutely wonderful day. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.